You can be thin on the outside, you can be normal on the scale and fit in the gym and still be metabolically sick. So you look lean, your BMI is normal, you go to the gym, you even avoid sugar. So when your doctor says you're pre-diabetic or worse, insulin resistant, it doesn't make any sense. But doctor, I'm not overweight, you say. Exactly. And that's the trap. Because the belief that only overweight people develop type 2 diabetes, that's a dangerous myth and one that's costing people their health. Today, we're going to expose what's really going on inside your organs, inside your cells, and even when the mirror says that everything looks fine. So, welcome everybody. My name is Dr. Mark Shankman. I'm an oral and maxillofacial surgeon that has a particular interest in obesity and insulin resistance and chronic disease. And we're busting some myths today. We've been busting some myths in the last two episodes, and I do want to thank my good friend, Dr. Ken Berry, a carnivore expert, a ketogenic and family physician. I'm borrowing, I'm ripping off his YouTube video cover, but it actually serves its purpose for me. So um, here's how the lie works. We've equated type 2 diabetes with obesity. And yes, they are deeply connected, but they're not exactly the same. Because you can be, as you see here, or TOFI, you can be thin on the outside, you can be normal on the scale and fit in the gym and still be metabolically sick. And in fact, studies suggest that up to 40% of people with normal BMI are metabolically unhealthy. That means they have high blood pressure, abnormal lipids, fatty liver, insulin resistance, and eventually going to end up being diabetic. But these people fly under the radar because their weight looks fine. That's why so many are diagnosed late when complications are already in motion. And I want to talk about my own personal journey. As I've mentioned previously, I do carnivore. I haven't lost a ton of weight because I don't have a ton of weight to lose. But I was a classic example of this, where I was intermittent fasting, I was eating a low carb diet, and yet, and I wasn't overweight, and yet I struggled with insulin resistance. I was pre-diabetic. I had a hemoglobin A1C of 5.9 in the pre-diabetic range, and I was doing all the right things. So TOFI is a real thing, and we need to address it. So there's a name for this phenomenon. As I mentioned, it's called TOFI. That stands for thin on the outside, fat on the inside. It means it's talking about the fat that you can't see, the fat that's wrapped around your liver, around your pancreas, your intestines. It's quietly fueling disease. And this isn't the jiggly fat under your skin that everybody hates and is so unsightly. This is visceral fat. It's metabolically active, it's inflammatory, and it's downright dangerous. And the kicker is you can have very little subcutaneous fat. The only place I ever stored fat was in my midsection, in my gut. I never carry it elsewhere. I didn't have, except maybe my face. You saw in my face back when I was about, I think I was about 50 pounds heavier. But you can have very little subcutaneous fat and still be filled with visceral fat. And I'll tell you from personal experience, getting rid of the visceral fat is really difficult through standard or conventional methods. So this visceral fat is especially problematic if you have a couple comorbidities or a couple other things that go along with the visceral fat. So if you have a family history of type 2 diabetes, if you have a sedentary job, if you sit behind a computer and tap away all day, but not really move, not really get any kind of exercise, if you have a processed carb heavy diet, or here's a kind of surprising one, if you're South Asian, Hispanic, or of Asian descent, these groups tend to develop metabolic disease at lower BMIs. So, no, being thin doesn't protect you, it simply hides the problem. So, let's get into what actually drives insulin resistance in normal weight people. So, visceral fat, number one, first and foremost, even a small amount is enough to trigger inflammation. Liver fat, aka non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You're not drinking, you're not getting fat liver in your not getting fat in your liver due to alcohol, which blocks insulin signaling. So fat in the liver creates insulin resistance. Also, mitochondrial dysfunction. The mitochondria, the cells stop burning fat because of this dysfunction, and the battery mitochondria, the battery packs of the cell, they no longer work efficiently. And then fourth, chronic overfeeding. Even clean food, even good healthy food, every 2 hours or so keeps insulin elevated. So we've got to be mindful of eating windows and fasting windows. And often these people, the people with these four things that I just described, visceral fat, liver fat, mitochondrial dysfunction, and chronic overfeeding, they often feel fine until they don't. And what are the first signs of TOFI? One, you get energy crashes. You can have cravings despite eating. You can have belly fat that simply won't go away. That stubborn, annoying belly fat. You can get brain fog. You can get high triglycerides and elevated fasting insulin even when glucose looks normal. But these things get dismissed because the scale isn't showing a problem. Because the doctor says you're not overweight, you're healthy. They're wrong. I'm telling you right now, they're wrong. So let's look at the research. Let's kind of crunch some data that destroys this myth. All right. So in 2016, in the Annals of Internal Medicine, there was a study where out of 10,000 people with normal weight, 1 in 3 were metabolically unhealthy or had unhealthy metabolic markers. There was a study in 2020 out of the UK called a Biobank study that demonstrated that lean individuals with fatty liver had a much higher risk of type 2 diabetes than obese people without liver fat, without fatty liver. So fatty liver is a very strong marker of type 2 diabetes. And then there was the Asia Pacific cohorts. In India, China, and Southeast Asia, type 2 diabetes is rampant in thin people, often with BMIs of under 23. Why? Because of high rates of visceral fat and poor insulin sensitivity. So when we simply use weight as a proxy for health, we miss millions and millions of people on the brink of disaster. So you can have someone who is 50 pounds heavier than you that carries it all in the subcutaneous fat, the fat under the skin, the wiggly jiggly fat. And you can be 50 pounds lighter, but carry it all in the visceral fat in the central core, and you're going to be more metabolically unhealthy. So let's talk about what to test and what to watch for. So how do you know if you're a TOFI? The bathroom scale simply won't help. Neither will BMI. But there are some tests that can uncover the truth. So first and foremost, we've got fasting insulin. It's the earliest warning sign, and ideally it should be under 8 micro units per milliliter. You can look at HOMA-IR. I've mentioned this in the previous video. It's a combined insulin resistance score. You can look at the triglyceride to HDL ratio, another one we talked about. A ratio over 2 is a red flag. And you can look at a liver ultrasound to detect early fatty liver. And then finally, a waist to height ratio. This is a much, much better. I was just talking about this today in the office. A much better predictor than BMI. So you take your waist circumference and you want the waist circumference to be pretty much half of what your total height is in inches. So, like for instance, I'm 5'6", so that's 66 inches. My waist size should be 33, and I'm at a 32. So my actual waist to height ratio is actually pretty good. But back when I was a 36 waist, not so much. And I've lost a lot of belly fat. I've lost a lot of visceral fat. And of course, we've got symptoms as well, not just tests. So we want to look for things like fatigue after meals. We want to look for sugar cravings, inability to lose fat despite clean eating. I ran into this one numerous times myself. You can see rising blood pressure and slightly elevated A1Cs or fasting glucose. You have to think about these signs and symptoms. They're the early whispers. They're whispering in your ear, there's a problem. So don't wait until these whispers become screams. You want to make sure you do something about it and you do something about it right away. It's starting to get a little bit dark here. Let me go ahead and just go ahead and put my light on for 1 second. I'll pause the video, come right. Okay, I'm back, and the light made me look like I was glowing orange. So we're gonna go with it the way we are. All right, so we talked about the whispers not becoming screams. So we want to heal from the inside out. So here's the good news. The good news is being TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, is reversible because this isn't about weight, it's about metabolic signaling. So when you lower insulin, you lower inflammation. When you lower inflammation, you burn fat, especially visceral fat. This is why I actually love the carnivore diet. I saw a major shift in my body composition, lost more visceral fat than any other diet that I did. Again, not pushing carnivore, just kind of giving you my own experience. Any ketogenic diet will do that. And so what we have to remember is when you lower inflammation, you burn fat, especially visceral fat. And when you lose visceral fat, your organs start working better again. And that means that we need to prioritize real food, real whole foods, things that have no barcodes, don't come in packages, and or packages or bags or boxes. We want to cut ultra processed carbs and seed oils. We got to get rid of these things. They are horrible for us and they do a lot of damage. We need to use intermittent fasting to rest your pancreas. Intermittent fasting is the best, cheapest, and easiest way to lower your insulin levels. So we need to use that that intermittent fasting to give the pancreas a break. We need to build lean muscle. Even 2 to 3 times a week will be very, very helpful in terms of losing visceral fat and getting rid of TOFI. And then we need to restore sleep and circadian rhythms. And for how many? A normal body becomes metabolically normal, often for the first time in years, by doing these things. So the next time someone tells you you're not overweight, so you're fine, remember this. Metabolic disease doesn't care about the number on the scale. It's irrelevant. It cares about what's happening in your liver, in your muscles, and in your mitochondria. Being thin doesn't mean you're safe. Now, being obese is certainly a warning sign, but being thin doesn't protect you. In fact, for millions of people, it's the perfect disguise for a disease that's already begun. You can't fix what you don't see, but now you see it thanks to this video. So coming up next, we're going to talk about the fourth myth in this latest series. Insulin resistance only affects diabetics. Well, that's not true, and we're going to talk about that because this isn't just about diabetes. It's about Alzheimer's, PCOS, cancer, and many more other chronic diseases. And we need to talk about these things. So I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Thanks this way. Thanks, Dr. Barry, for donating your face and your YouTube picture for me to use. And thank you so much for watching. Like, share, and comment. Drop some comments down below. Tell me whether you think you're skinny fat or whether you're metabolically healthy, and how do you know? And make sure to subscribe to get more of these videos. And I just want to thank everybody for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.